Guten Tag.
Guten Tag, hi.
Okay, we're here with HasuObs at the IEM VII World Championships. Group stage is all done. You went out in the group stage, so what are your overall thoughts about how your individual campaign went at this tournament?
Not too good. I expected a little bit more. I was really upset by the loss against Nurtio. I think I could have done way better, but it was the first best of 3 in the tournament, and somehow I played really shaky. And I just forgot some things to do, that's why I lost. And well, then I beat Slivko 2-0, which is okay, I guess. And then I lost to Lucifron 1-2, but I already expected to lose to the Terran player in my group. I didn't really prepare too much for Terran because there was only one in my group. And then I lost, it was 1-2 against Lucifron, and then I lost against both Koreans 0-2, which, well, both games were PvP. And I expected a bit more of my PvPs because I practiced a lot with Socke and some other German players before the CBIT. So that was a little bit disappointing, but I mean, Yonghwa and Parting are both much better than I am. So I mean, it was expected that I lost, but I thought I could make like 1-2 or maybe 2-1 if I'm a bit lucky. And in the end, it didn't really matter anymore because Nurtio won his last match against Slivko, so I was out anyway. So yeah, not too happy with it.
From talking to some of the other pros in interviews about Heart of the Swarm, some of the non-Protoss players told me that now it's almost sort of flipped in PvZ, where now the Protoss is the one who can try and get into the late game and like macro up. I mean, based on what I know about your style, this should be like a favorable scenario for you if it's true.
Yeah, it's actually true. And yeah, you can definitely sit around as a Protoss in late game against Zerg, and you can get the army which is almost unbeatable for the Zerg, I think. Kind of similar to Broodlord Infestor and Spine Crawlers, where you make a lot of cannons, High Templars, and then you have like Archons, Void Rays, and Tempest. Not too many Tempest, because you only need them to kill the Broodlords. And at that point, I think it's extremely hard for the Zerg to kill the Protoss. Maybe they should go for multi-prong harass, or I don't know, Nido Swarms, Overlords, just the way Protoss tried to win with War Prisms and stuff. But I also have to say it's not working on every map, obviously, because sometimes you just can't go for a map split. And I think Zerg has some good timings before that, with like Roach, Hydra, Viper, where they pull out the Colossus and stuff like that, if there are no High Templars yet. Or even like the Roach, Hydra, Corruptor, similar to Wings of Liberty, but with the new Hydralisk speed, it's obviously much stronger in the offensive. So I think Zerg has some good timing windows. But it's obviously not too easy for them, and especially in the late game, I have to agree. With the current gameplay and the current maps, it's very, very hard for them to beat the Protoss player in the very, very late game, where it's like 4, maybe 5 bases.
So some of the Zergs I've been talking to have been complaining that Protoss is imbalanced now, and you know, if they build the right units, they always win. You know, the thing is, obviously, I mean, Nurtio is one of these people who is of that opinion. I mean, he already thought Protoss was imbalanced in Wings of Liberty. I'll just throw that in there. And so the fact that he just lost to Mana is going to make anyone who agrees with that opinion think, oh, it must be true then if Mana finally beat him. Like, what did you think of that series? I'm guessing you watched some of it. And what did you think about those statements in general?
Well, first of all, this is the first Heart of the Swarm tournament, and it's still the beta, even though it might get released with the same patch, but it's still the beta, so I wouldn't complain too much about balance right now. I mean, there are definitely some issues with every race right now, but it's nothing like we have to sit around for like 4 or 5 months playing the same patch. So I wouldn't complain too much right now. And about the Nurtio Mana game, this best of 5 was very weird. Almost every game was pretty back and forth for both of them. And I think the very last game, Metropolis, the 5th map, Nurtio was far ahead with Mutalisks. He did a lot of damage, and then he kept making Mutas, but not a single Corruptor. And those games he won before against Mana, where it was the Mutalisk style against Phoenixes, he always mixed in Corruptors to counter the Phoenixes. And in the 5th map, he just forgot to do that. So it was pure Muta against a growing number of Phoenixes, and in the end, Mana had enough units. And also, Mana had 3-0 upgrades on his ground units against 0-0. Of Nurtios. So yeah, there were just some things Nerchio didn't do right in the end anymore, because it looked like he felt very, very far ahead at some point, and then he kept wasting units, kept attacking, and at one point he was falling apart because he didn't have the upgrades, he didn't have the tech switch anymore, and that's why Mana was able to come back. And the other games, as I said, there were pretty weird games where Mana tried to go for an 8 gate, but then being supply blocked for like 1 minute, so that failed. And then somehow still winning the game, because Nerchio made some mutas and Mana was just attacking into his natural on Newkirk City it was, so that usually does not happen. And in this best of 5 it happened, so I wouldn't really blame it on the balance or something. It just, Mana was a bit more lucky, I guess.
And in general, you don't think Protoss is? I mean, people are going to say the Zergs are complaining it's imbalanced in PBZ, but Protoss isn't the strongest race right now.
I don't think we are the strongest race right now. If I'm honest, I think Terran is a bit stronger. And as I said, I think Zerg has a lot of timing windows to use against Protoss. Also, Mutalisks are very strong. If there are no Phoenixes on the map, or no blind Phoenixes where you produce them before you see Mutalisks, then like a number of 50 mutas can be very, very troublesome in killing a lot of probes and getting a huge advantage. So, yeah, I just don't want to talk too much about the balance, because I don't think, it's still very early in the game. I mean, there will be a lot of changes, definitely.
From the other side, from the Zerg side, it seems like, I mean, Rhett surprised a lot of people, did very well. And part of that you can credit to he was using Swarm Host a lot, and he was actually telling me like he's surprised that the other Zergs weren't using this. Do you think that, I mean, the funny thing is, some of the Zergs who are complaining were saying that the reason why the Protosses aren't like completely just owning everyone is because they don't know how to abuse their imbalance. So do you think it's actually the case that some of the Zergs haven't like figured out their own style with ZVP?
Yeah, I think Red is doing that well because he's using Swarm Host. It worked against the Korean Protosses, and it definitely works against European Protosses, because we practiced against that. And Swarm Hosts are definitely a very, very strong tool for the Zerg. And it's really hard for Protoss to do the right decisions once you see Swarm Host, because they will keep sending locusts. Like once they are close to your third base, they will constantly send locusts, and sometimes it's very hard to get enough DPS to kill them without losing units. And if you don't get to that point where you have enough DPS, then Swarm Hosts are extremely good. And then like the only way out of this is going for base trade. But if the Zerg is smart, he will have enough spines or maybe even some infestors to pin your army down. So yeah, I really like to see Red using the Swarm Host, and it's pretty efficient so far in this tournament. And yeah, it's also very smart to do that. So I was a bit disappointed that Slivko, for example, didn't try a Swarm Host at all, but complaining about balance already. So I'm pretty sure we will see Swarm Host against Protoss more often in the future.
Obviously, if we talk bad about any of the Zergs who came up during the patch, people are going to say, oh, you're calling them patch Zerg, they must be rubbish. But we can see a trend that people like Vortex, people like Snoot, these guys were on top towards the end of last year. That was like their peak, and then they did very badly at this tournament. And also, Mana was doing so badly in PBZ in general, and then he had this group full of people who were good Wings of Liberty Zergs, did quite well against them. Is there any conclusion to be drawn from how badly those Zergs did?
I mean, Infestors are much worse now in Heart of the Swarm, and I think some of those players, maybe not here, maybe not Snoot, maybe not Vortex, but some Zerg players who did good recently were definitely carried by Infestors, at least a little bit. I don't say they don't have any skill or something, but it was easier for them to do the right things, to play defensive, getting your spines, go up to Broodlords. And because they did that for such a long time, I think it's very hard for them to change their playstyle in Heart of the Swarm right now. Zerg is completely different now. You can't just sit around with maxing Infestors, Corruptors, then turning them into Broodlords. You have to be more active on the map, going for new strategies, using the new units. Vipers, for example, are also not easy to use, because yeah, obviously they can get feedbacked and stuff. And we did see some crucial micro mistakes here in this tournament. For example, Slivko had 9 Vipers, against Yonghua, I think, and he lost all of them without using a single spell. And that was not because of feedback, just because he, I don't know, move controlled them into the army. Same for Stefano when he tried to use Vipers against one of the Terran players. Where, yeah, I think Dream, where 3 or 4 Vipers just died right away, and then you saw Stefano was smiling at the same time, because he knew with those Vipers it would have been much more easier. So I think some of the Zergs really need to change their style, and it will probably take some time to get into the new play style. So I wouldn't overreact and tell, they are all patched Zergs, they don't have skills. So just wait a bit and see how it goes in the next 2 or 3 months. I'm pretty sure then you will figure out whose of those Zergs really got carried by Infestors and who just needed a bit more time to change their playstyle.
I mean, this makes a convenient point to talk about Terran, because you were mentioning before you think it's the strongest race, and the interesting thing was, when I talked to the Zergs, they were all complaining about the Protoss. Then when I talked to the Protoss, they all told me, no, Terran's the strongest. And the one Zerg who actually agreed with the Protoss was actually Red. He was saying he didn't really have that many problems versus Protoss, but he thought Terran was the hard one. So what is standing out for you that's so difficult?
I think, well, let's make it very simple. I think Terran can play almost the same strategies as before, but having the crazy buff of the Medivacs, where the afterburn is so strong now, it's almost no risk to drop or even be on the map, because you can always pick up and fly away so easily. You can almost escape from Blink, or Fungal Growth obviously is also a projectile now, so you can fly away. So there's almost no more risk for a Terran to be on the map or to go for drop play. And in addition to that, the Widow Mines are extremely strong. Since the buff against the Protoss, like the shield damage, they buffed the damage against shields. It one-shots every gateway unit, I think. It one-shots the Oracle. So it is pretty hard to attack the Terran player in the early game. And the Widow Mines are very strong in the offensive as well. When they get dropped with a couple Marines inside your mineral line, then small mistakes can cost you the game right away, because they will blow up so many probes, or they will deny mining time for, like, I don't know, 20 seconds or something, and then the game is lost. So like those two things, the Terran can play the same as before, but having the very strong Medivacs and the, I think, pretty easy usage of Widow Mines, but at the same time being that strong makes Terran very, very fearsome right now.
People have been joking that the Terran players should hope that MVP doesn't win the tournament, because then Blizzard might just instantly nerf the Medivac. Is that even plausible?
Well, if you remember Morrow winning the first IEM with Reapers, the Reapers was nerfed right away. And I think after the Reaper nerf, they were never played again in Wings of Liberty, because they nerfed them so hard. So I guess if MVP or one of the other Korean Terrans shows the world how strong Widow Mines or even the Afterburner is, could change Blizzard's mind about this topic and maybe nerf it a little bit again.
I mean, you made some good specific Terran unit points there, but is it possible there's also a component where, okay, it sounds like the Zerg and the Protoss players have had to kind of like drastically change their styles in certain matchups, in certain spots in the game, whereas you're saying there, basically the Terrans are playing similar strategies, but now they have like a better unit, basically. Is there a degree to which the fact they already kind of have their strategies pre-made could be part of why they're doing so well?
You mean like pre-made Heart of the Swarm strategies, or just...
They just kind of... They already have like a playbook of knowing what to do, roughly.
Yeah, well, as I said, I think it's pretty much the same openings as we saw in Wings of Liberty from the Terrans. Obviously, I mean, for Zerg, it's also 14 pool, 15 hedge, or whatever, but still the follow-up is a bit different for Zerg and Protoss right now, because, like Protoss has the Mothership Core, and they have to spend the gas differently, because Stargate is stronger now. But for Terran, it's like still the same game plan most of the time. They open up more with gas, because obviously the Reaper is very strong as well. But with the Reaper, they can scout so well. And then it lines up very similar to Wings of Liberty. You get Stimpack, you get your bio upgrades, you get the Medivacs, and then you have the factory, so you can build some Widow Mines if you want to. If you don't want to, you can fly and scout with the factory, just like you did in Wings of Liberty. And then you have the Medivac speed, so it's easier to drop. So I think it might be a bit easier for them to play Heart of the Swarm on a very high level already in this early stage of the game, while Zergs and Protosses still have to figure out how exactly is the new build order with a mothership core, or how do I get to Vipers without taking too much risk. Things like that needs to be figured out, while, as I said, I think Terran can basically go for the same game plan as before.
If we look at the results of this IEM so far, and then think of the last one, the one in Poland as well, you have these players where they don't have much profile, like they're not big names, like Dream, who got all the way to the final, beat Parting. You had Yoda here, and even though I think Yoda might have been in Code S for a season or something, even so, if you go to his Wikipedia page, it's almost nothing on there. It says he like played in an ESV Weekly once or something. So these are players where, in terms of name, they shouldn't be like top level players, and in Korea they're not necessarily top level players, but they've come over here and they're pretty much tearing up the tournaments. I mean, were you aware just how deep the like Korean scene was in this sense, that even like their lower players are equivalent to the top in Europe?
Yeah, that's how it is in Korea, and I think every European or American player knows that there are so many good Koreans. I think we heard of them, and at the same time we know we most likely can't beat them in a tournament, or it's going to be extremely hard. And those are not even the top Koreans, so yeah, it's pretty insane how good the Korean skill level overall is, like how many good players they have. And if you think about it, then I guess you can understand why some of the top Koreans are that strong, if they can practice with the lower Koreans, and even they are so strong, beating most of the Europeans and North Americans pretty easy. So yeah, that's why I guess the Koreans steamroll most of the foreign tournaments.
Okay, bearing in mind when I asked this question, Heart of the Swarm is still in beta technically, and we could also see some changes very quickly afterwards. Just based on what you've seen so far, maybe on ladder or in these tournaments, which Europeans would you say we should look to as the ones who are going to be like the strongest players, or that you would guess based on their style and how Heart of the Swarm might fit them? Who comes to mind as like you think they're really going to be suited by Heart of the Swarm?
I think Red is going to be one of the very strong foreigners, not based on this tournament, obviously this proves it, but I think Red in Wings of Liberty was never a Zerg who liked to play Broodlord Infestor. He was not the guy who wanted to stand around and waiting for his super army. He was more of the guy who had extremely good macro, extremely good army movement and like flanking stuff. So I think the playstyle of Heart of the Swarm will fit him much more right now, with the new Mutalisk obviously as well. And then it's really hard to say. I think Sokka is playing very smart as well. Mana seems to be, yeah, without his weakness against Zerg, I guess he's going to be very strong again. Because in Wings of Liberty he was pretty strong in PvP and PvT, but Zerg was by far his weakest matchup, and this seems to be a bit better right now. And then, I don't know, Lucifer and the Vortex weren't that good so far in Heart of the Swarm. I guess they also didn't have too much practice yet because they were switching pretty late. Slivko, I guess he needs a bit more time. Yeah, it's pretty hard to say. Let's wait like 1 or 2 more months, and I'm pretty sure we will figure out yeah, which foreigner is going to be very strong.
To close up in terms of your own game, I mean, you must have seen in interviews, basically almost every single player, when asked, oh, do you think Heart of the Swarm will favor you? Everyone said, oh no, I'll be much better. The game's going to suit me. Especially anyone who was doing badly wanted to make out as though they'd instantly do a turnaround, you know? I mean, we talked a little bit before about the macro style of Protoss maybe favors you a little bit more. Do you have a sense from what you've seen so far that, like, will HasuObs' career in Heart of the Swarm be much better than it was in Wings of Liberty?
I wish, and I hope, but I'm not really sure yet. As you said, it's still the beta, so there might be some changes to the very late game of Protoss. Maybe Void Race getting a nerf, or Tempest a little bit. But like, I played a lot of HOTS already. I was on a bootcamp before the CBIT for like, I don't know, 9 or 10 days. And I practiced a lot, and I actually felt very confident when playing Heart of the Swarm. Unfortunately, it didn't really work out at the IEM, which makes me a bit sad, but the EPS is going to switch to Heart of the Swarm now, and then there is going to be the EZ UK in Telford, and I'm really looking forward to play there, and yeah, I will see how it goes, and I think I might be a bit stronger in HOTS, but it's hard to say right now, because it's such early in the game, so let's wait and see.
Okay, do you have any final words?
Yeah, thanks for the interview. Thanks to all the sponsors and partners of Mousesports. Thanks to my fans and all the supporters. Yeah, that's it. Thanks you.
Danke.
Danke.